We live on the run, and what's worse, we think it's normal. We wake up to the alarm clock jolting us, as if the day has already started and we're being charged for being late. We swallow our coffee, answer messages while brushing our teeth, and barely notice that we're already immersed in yet another cycle of urgency, as if life were an eternal fire to be put out. This isn't efficiency, it's imprisonment. Today, more than 70% of the world's population say they experience anxiety every day. According to the WHO, Brazil is the most anxious country on the planet. This is no coincidence. It's the direct result of a culture that has turned time into an enemy and haste into a virtue. We are conditioned to believe that if we are not busy all the time, we are failing. That rest is laziness. That leisure is luxury. And so we become slaves, not to chains, but to deadlines, targets, clocks, and notifications. With every new tab opened in the browser, an expectation. Every just one more task, a new invisible weight on our shoulders. How many times have you ended the day feeling that, even though you've done a lot, you haven't done enough? This video is a call for clarity, a map to understand how we fell into this unhealthy cycle, and more importantly, how we can get out of it. Because if we continue to ignore the signs, the price will be high, not just in mental health, but in quality of life, relationships, identity. There's a whole world outside this rush, and it's time to find it again. Now, let's understand when it all started, because it's only by understanding the roots of the problem that we can root it out. The feeling of constant urgency didn't come out of nowhere. It has deep roots in a silent but brutal historical process, the transformation of time into a commodity. Before the Industrial Revolution, the rhythm of life was dictated by the sun, the seasons, and natural cycles. The clock didn't control the human being. It was the other way around. But everything changed when work ceased to be linked to the earth and began to be governed by machines. With industrialization, time began to be measured in productivity. Every minute had a price. What used to be life became a spreadsheet. If you've ever felt guilty because you weren't producing, you can be sure that guilt wasn't born in you. It was built in. The 20th century intensified this process. The advance of technology, scientific work management methods, the cult of efficiency. Along came offices, time clocks, and tight schedules. But nothing compares to the leap we've made in the last 2 decades. The digital age has not only shortened distances, it has also destroyed any boundaries between personal and professional life. Today, a work message can find you at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. An email can ruin your Sunday. And the cruelest thing, you get used to it. Social networks, productivity apps, online meetings, tight deadlines. The smartphone, which could be a tool of freedom, has become a pocket shackle. With every vibration, an interruption. With every scroll, a silent demand that you should be doing something more important. This rush we feel is not just a rhythm. It's an ideology, a way of thinking and living that associates human value with the speed with which tasks are carried out. We are the only species that feel shame for stopping, and that says a lot about how disconnected we are from ourselves. And when time becomes the enemy, everything around us collapses. Relationships become superficial, listening becomes apathy, touch becomes distraction. Even silence becomes uncomfortable. Stopping becomes almost an act of rebellion. But how do we know if we're already trapped in this logic? How do we identify if the culture of haste has already colonized us from within? When haste becomes the norm, the symptoms don't scream out immediately. They whisper. They manifest themselves in small tensions that gradually become routine, waking up tired, even after hours of sleep, feeling guilty for stopping for a few minutes during the day, finding it difficult to simply eat a meal without looking at your cell phone. These are the first signs of a silent slavery, and perhaps the most dangerous of all, the one that happens inside the mind. Constant anxiety, for example, is an old acquaintance of most people, but not everyone realizes that it often doesn't come from great tragedies, but from the daily pressure of having to deal with everything all the time. You open your eyes in the morning and your heart starts racing, not from fear, but from anticipation. Your mind is already on the email, the meeting, the bill that's due tomorrow, the project that's been delayed. The body is in bed, but the brain is running a marathon. Another common symptom is the difficulty of living in the present. We're always rushing to the next item on the list, as if life were a sequence of tasks and not an experience to be lived. Even moments of leisure become goals. I have to watch that series. I need to read that book. I can't miss that event. Rest becomes another commitment. This is exhausting and deeply inhuman. And there's an even more subtle element: constant comparison. On social media, other people's haste is disguised as success. We see people posting productive routines, 5 a.m. alarm clocks, healthy meals, intense workouts, deadlines met, goals achieved. And without realizing it, we start to think that we should be there too, delivering everything, all the time. The problem is that this comparison is unfair, because what is shown on the web is the shop window, not behind the scenes. The slavery of haste also robs us of depth. Love relationships lose their intimacy, conversations become fragmented, friendships become notifications left unviewed, impatience becomes standard. Active listening gives way to instant judgment, and so we lose not only others, but ourselves. All this leads us to an illusion that if we just run a little further, we'll manage. But it's not a race with a finish line. It's a vicious cycle that feeds on its own acceleration. However, there is a crucial element in this prison that has not yet been explored: the idea that everything needs to be useful, productive, monetizable. When did we start to believe that our value depends on how much we deliver? The idea that we are what we produce is one of the biggest lies we accept without question. This modern myth that we can and should always deliver more not only shapes our routine, but also distorts our identity. We come to define ourselves by positions, targets achieved, results delivered. And when we don't achieve what's expected, we don't feel like we failed at something. We feel that we are the failure. Today, with the culture of hustle, grind, and toxic productivity being sold as a lifestyle, there is a glorification of excess. Working late is a source of pride. Running out of time has become synonymous with importance. Those who say "I'm overloaded" are often seen as successful, and this logic is as perverse as it is seductive, because it offers a false sense of control. The more I do, the more valued I will be. But the human body is not a machine, and the human spirit even less so. We are beings of cycles, limits, and pauses. Ignoring this is like driving a car at full throttle with an almost empty tank and ignoring the warnings on the dashboard. Sooner or later, it will stop, and when it does, the repair will be expensive. Today's corporate world, with its performance metrics and constant evaluations, is a direct reflection of this belief in infinite productivity. Meetings that could be emails, unrealistic targets disguised as challenges, environments where vulnerability is seen as weakness and burnout as a silent trophy. This is not efficiency, it's institutionalized sickness. And this mentality is not restricted to work. It invades all areas of life. Parents who blame themselves for not being able to cope with everything. Self-employed professionals who work 7 days a week for fear of not being seen. Students who can no longer study for pleasure, only out of obligation. and even moments of leisure now need to generate a return. The book read must be posted. The trip must yield content. The hobby must be monetized. We've lost track of what it means to do something just because it makes sense to us. What doesn't generate profit seems to have no value. This impoverishes us as human beings, because there is wisdom in simply being, in doing nothing productive, in breathing without haste, without goals, without expectation of return. And in this scenario, silence, which should be a space for reflection and presence, becomes unbearable, because where there is silence, there is room for what we ignore: accumulated tiredness, stifled emotions, lost meaning. But the body notices. It always does. And that's when we start to pay the price for forced productivity. When the mind ignores the signals, the body starts screaming. And it's no exaggeration. The excess of stimuli, the constant demands, the lack of breaks, all of this turns into physical symptoms that become more and more common and more ignored. The backache that never goes away, chronic insomnia, the headache at the end of almost every working day, the feeling of a knot in the chest, as if something is always about to burst. But these aren't just isolated signs. They are warnings from the body saying, I can't live at this pace any longer. The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational syndrome. It is no longer a rare condition. It has become a silent epidemic. Brazil is among the countries with the most cases of work-related emotional exhaustion. And the most worrying thing is that it no longer only affects adults. Teenagers and young people are reaching their limits even before they enter the job market. This continuous overload unbalances the entire nervous system. The constant release of cortisol, the stress hormone, generates internal inflammation, compromises immunity, and even impacts brain function. And the cruelest thing is that on the outside, everything often looks fine. The person keeps delivering, keeps showing up at meetings, keeps posting smiling photos. But on the inside, they're falling apart. Emotional health also collapses. Constant irritation for no clear reason. Lack of pleasure even in activities that were once a source of joy. Tiredness that doesn't go away with a night's sleep. And, in many cases, a disconnection with one's own identity. The person no longer knows what they like, what they feel, what they want. They just carry on. How many people do you know who have fallen ill trying to cope with everything? Who had to stop by force? A breakdown, a panic attack, a hospitalization? Haste has stolen lives not only in the literal sense, but also in the existential sense. We are living faster and faster, but less and less. And perhaps the scariest thing is to realize that we have normalized all of this. That saying, I don't have time, has become a socially accepted justification for not taking care of ourselves, not seeing our children, not taking exams, not loving calmly. But there is another way, and it begins where almost no one is looking, in the recovery of presence, of awareness, of the human rhythm. And for that, we need to relearn how to live. The good news is that we are not alone in this quest. Some of history's greatest philosophers have already noticed this existential void generated by acceleration. They didn't have smartphones or deadlines, but they already saw the danger of a life driven solely by productivity. In a world where speed is synonymous with value, choosing slowness is almost a revolutionary act. But this is not a new idea. Philosophers more than 2,000 years ago already pointed out the danger of living on automatic, guided by other people's desires, goals that aren't ours, obligations that alienate us from who we really are. They weren't talking about productivity, but they were talking about essence, and that's where the antidote lies. Epicurus, for example, was an advocate of simplicity. For him, True pleasure did not lie in grandiose achievements, but in tranquility of spirit, in time with friends, in the absence of disturbances. He proposed a life centered on what really matters, free from excess and imposed expectations. In times of constant comparison and unattainable goals, his philosophy is more relevant than ever. Seneca, for his part, saw time as the most valuable asset. In his work, On the Shortness of Life, he wrote that we don't have too little time, we have too much wasted. And when we look at the way we live today, stuck in routines, in endless feeds, in cycles of exhaustion, it's clear that he was right. It's not the quantity of years that matters, but the quality with which we live them. And living with quality requires presence. In the 20th century, Martin Heidegger brought a profound reflection on authentic existence. For him, human beings only truly find themselves when they come face to face with their finitude, with death, with the limit, with silence. And in this encounter, he realized that haste only serves to avoid the discomfort of looking inwards. He called it a flight from being, and perhaps there is no more precise definition for our era. These thinkers teach us that slowing down isn't stopping, it's choosing better where you're going. It's refusing the dictatorship of doing for the sake of doing. It's living deeply, even if that means doing less. And more than that, it's relearning how to listen to others, to oneself, to time. Today, this philosophy can be applied to simple but powerful acts: eating slowly, walking aimlessly, being present in a conversation without thinking about what comes next, refusing hyperconnection, saying no to commitments that don't make sense. Reject the idea that we are only worthy if we are delivering something. Life doesn't have to be a race, and meaning often lies precisely in the interval between one thing and another. And when we start to apply these ideas, we realize something even more profound: that slowness is not a problem, it's an opportunity, a chance to rediscover yourself. And more than that, to create a life that makes sense, not just noise. But how do we put this into practice in a world that insists on speeding up? Slowing down isn't just a nice wish, it's an urgent need. But getting out of automatic mode takes more than willpower. It requires strategy, commitment, and, above all, courage. Because it takes courage to go against the current, to say enough when everyone seems to be shouting more. The first key lies in creating boundaries. The absence of boundaries between work and personal life is one of the main reasons for burnout. Having set times to start and stop work, even if you're self-employed or work from home, is an act of mental protection. Closing the computer at the end of the day is not laziness, it's health. The second essential change is to reclaim silence. We live surrounded by noise, sounds, screens, messages, opinions. Silence scares us because it connects us with what we are trying to avoid, but it's where clarity lies. Creating moments of disconnection every day, whether in the morning over coffee or at night before bed, is like opening a window inside yourself. Without this space, we drown in stimulation. Another powerful practice is consciously scheduling leisure time. Yes, that's right, putting moments of doing nothing on the agenda. This may seem strange, even guilty at first, but gradually you realize that it's in these spaces that creativity flourishes, the body recovers, and the mind organizes itself. Idleness isn't the opposite of productivity, it's the breeding ground for it. It's also vital to relearn how to say no. Many of the pressures we feel come from the fear of disappointing others, but trying to please everyone is a sure recipe for abandonment. Evaluate commitments, filter priorities, respect your rhythm. The world will keep turning, even if you stop for a moment, and you'll finally be able to turn with it instead of against it. Finally, Get back in touch with what nourishes you. It could be a book read calmly, a long bath, a conversation without a cell phone in sight. These are small gestures that reprogram the body and mind for another kind of existence, one in which haste is not in charge, but only observes from the outside. The good news is that you don't have to wait for a breakdown to change. You can start now, small, slow, but steady. Because every step in the opposite direction to the rush is a step towards freedom. And that freedom doesn't lie in doing everything. It lies in doing what matters, with presence, with truth, with soul. We live in a time when stopping seems like a mistake, where rest generates guilt, where even leisure needs to be productive. But perhaps the greatest gesture of courage today is to slow down, to take a deep breath, refusing the imposed rhythm, choosing depth over haste. You don't have to become a monk or abandon everything to do this. Just start observing the signs. Your body, your mind, your peace. They know the way back. And every choice to be present, every decision to say no to excess is a reconquest of yourself. If this video has helped you reflect, if it has touched on something you've been feeling but couldn't name, like the video, share it with someone who also needs to hear it and subscribe to the channel. This helps the content reach more people who, like you, are looking for more meaning and less noise. And if at any point in these words you felt welcomed, understood, or awakened, consider making a symbolic donation to the channel of any amount. Just as you need time and silence to live better, this channel also needs support to continue producing profound reflections with quality and truth. The support button is below. Remember, it's not the speed with which you live that defines the greatness of your life. It's the depth with which you're present. Choose to live with soul, even if that means moving slower than the world.